South African Indians started out in 1860 as indentured labourers brought to South Africa from British colonial India. They were made to work on sugar plantations for slave wages, and after 5 years, a large portion of the population chose to settle in what is known now as KwaZulu-Natal. Due to the high levels of poverty and famine in India, most of the labourers sought to escape to greener pastures, but were misled by their contracts, thinking they would be treated fairly and receive fair wages.
गिरमिट कमाई है, बहुत दुख तकलीफ काटे के पड़ा।
अरे हम गोरा लोग लाश से मारे इससे।
अच्छा।
हाँ। गोरा लोग लाश से मारे, काम नहीं करो, चाबुक लगाए गाड़ी पर।
हाँ।
कोई सुनवाई नहीं।
हाँ।
गिरमिट तुम्हार।
Indian labourers were considered outsiders initially, but eventually their numbers were so vast that the British government was forced to categorise them as they did with the rest of the non-white population. They were known as Asians or Indians, and the derogatory name given to them was coolies. Fast forward to 1974, when The Last Grave at Dimbaza was filmed illegally in apartheid South Africa and showcased the suffering of black people under white supremacist rule. Indian people were segregated into their own townships like Phoenix and Chatsworth.
The Group Areas Act is now being enforced against the coloured and Indian populations. They're being evicted from their homes so that the cities become all white.
While the documentary focuses on the disparities between black and white people, using the juxtaposition of starving black children versus the opulence of white life, there was a small mention of the displacement of Indian and coloured people. In that segment, Curling highlighted some of what coloured people were experiencing and what happened to their previously occupied homes. However, The Last Grave at Dimbaza does not expose much in terms of how Indian people were surviving at the time of filming. But I don't think that that is necessarily a bad thing. It would have been beneficial to show all of the groups that were oppressed during the apartheid era and that most people of colour suffered under the regime. Black people had suffered the most at the hands of the white-only government. However, it would have added exposure for Indian people since the documentary was screened to foreign audiences if they were given as much of a mention as coloured people were. When deduced to basic story principles, the villain of The Last Grave at Dimbaza and South Africa during the apartheid times are the white superiors and the white government. In 1974, all people of colour, black, coloured and Indian, shared this enemy and oppressor, which is what The Last Grave does particularly well at showcasing by inserting actual statements and facts about politicians.
Prime Minister Vorster was imprisoned during the Second World War for his pro-Nazi sympathies.
We need them to work for us, but the fact that they work for us can never entitle them to claim political rights, not now, nor in the future, under no circumstance.
Mr. Froneman has said,
we are trying to introduce the migrant labour pattern as far as possible in every sphere. This is, in fact, the entire basis of our policy as far as the white economy is concerned.
So, in my opinion, the fact that The Last Grave at Dimbaza barely touches on the Indian experience of apartheid doesn't make it any less of an impactful documentary. However, it would have presented a more unified picture of the oppressed races, even though not all non-white races were discriminated against on the same level. The Last Grave depicted the struggles of those considered on the lowest ends of society, and did so with unflinching imagery, so it would gain a bigger exposure to the pure and real shocking images of a black children's cemetery.